Johnson. It's good to be with you once again. Welcome to this morning's press briefing with officials from the Royal Grenada Police Force. So I'll start with my immediate left. We have with us here Inspector Randall Batiste. He is attached to the Administration and Traffic Department of the Royal Grenada Police Force. We also have with us Assistant Commissioner Chessman Prince, as well as Superintendent Vanny Kerwin in charge of Community Relations, and Superintendent Randy Connaught in charge of Traffic. This morning, we're talking police operational issues, hurricane preparedness. We know that the hurricane season is just around the corner. We're also talking traffic issues as well as emergency powers COVID-19 regulations. So I will start off with Assistant Commissioner Prince.
Okay, thank you, Madam Moderator, and good morning to everyone. It's a wonderful privilege and pleasure for us to again come to you via this medium, members of the public, to let you know what is happening within the RGPF in terms of our operations. And let me begin by first of all expressing our profound gratitude and thanks to Almighty God for keeping the city for us. We dwell on the portion of scripture that says, if the Lord does not keep the city, then the watchman watcheth but in vain. We have a responsibility to watch, and we believe and know for a fact that our watching is not all that is needed to keep our country safe, but the great Master and God Almighty help is always needed to watch over the city for us. I also want to express appreciation to all the persons, the citizens of Grenada, who has seen it fit and appropriate to comply with the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations in its entirety. I can say that there are people in our community and in our society that we had absolutely no problems with whatsoever. And I think that is the vast majority of our citizens. And I think they need to compliment themselves for the way that they behave and conducted themselves during that period of time. I also want to take the opportunity to recognize as well the frontline workers, the essential services workers from the various sectors, including the churches that have been in the background throughout this experience, praying for us and wishing us well. And again, to commend the officers of the Royal Grenada Police Force, including the traffic wardens, for the yeoman service during the challenging times. During the past 8 weeks, the RGPF stood strong and watched over the city with diligence to allow the nation to cope with the threat of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was not an easy task as we continue to do this, but the cooperation and support, whether tangible or intangible support from the community and the public of the public, made our task much easier. We are still in the state of emergency with a statewide curfew from 7 a.m. on the 11th of May to 7 a.m. on the 19th of May 2020. Now, with the provisional exception to the freedom of movement that may be exercised during the period 5 a.m. to 7 p.m. daily. What this means is that every person shall remain confined to the place of residence and avoid contact outside of the household, except during the period of the provisional exception for the freedom of movement to access essential services or supplies, or to move to and from work within the sectors that have been approved for operation during that time. This also means that if anyone leaves his or her residence, it must be for the purpose of engaging in any of the approved activities during the existing regulations. In other words, it is not expected that persons will leave their home just to go out and lime or just to go and hang out. It has to be for the express purpose of engaging in some essential activity or accessing some essential service that is provided under the regulations. The police will continue to conduct its operation to mitigate against the spread of this coronavirus by way of ensuring the social distancing protocol or the physical distancing protocol is maintained, and the observance of the wearing of the mask and all of the other protocols that give powers to the police to act on the violations or the violators. The police will continue to do those things to ensure that we are not going to be more vulnerable than we may have been in the past. So you're going to see us continuing to establish our roadblocks, or what you call our checkpoints, throughout the state, and in particular during the curfew period from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. daily. And at these checkpoints, the expectation is that persons moving during that period of time must be moving with purpose. And purpose here means that you are an essential service provider that is authorized to move during that period of time. And this is about the movements of people, not the movements of vehicle. So any individual who is moving, whether you may have a vehicle pass or a pass for your vehicle as a driver and the individual having a pass, any passenger in your vehicle should also have in his or her possession a pass authorizing him or her to be on the road at that particular time. So we want to advise persons who are moving, if you're an essential worker or you have some authorization to move during that period of time, you cannot take a friend to ride with you or a buddy to drop off at some point without that person having the authorization to move. You will be checked and the necessary actions will be taken. I must hasten to say also that while our checkpoints and our roadblocks are in place, we may have situations, or members of the public may have situations of emergencies that need to get to the hospital. And this is accommodated for at the checkpoints. But you must indicate to the persons that are manning these checkpoints that you have an emergency and identify the emergency with the person managing the checkpoint so that you can get the authorization to move. The police doesn't have any intention to delay you outside of what is necessary to verify the fact that you in fact have an emergency. We must be very careful that even with an emergency, you cannot and you should not try or attempt to overrun a roadblock at any part of Grenada, because there can be serious consequences. So again, we want to appeal to the general public. If you have an emergency and you are seeking to get to the hospital and you come upon a checkpoint or a roadblock, what you need to do is to identify immediately to the officers manning the checkpoint that you have an emergency. Once they are satisfied of your emergency, then you can proceed. But do not attempt to run the roadblock or the checkpoint. Despite the cooperation of the vast majority of persons who comply and are continuing to comply with the regulations, we saw a number of persons who continue to violate the regulations throughout the period, most of whom have been arrested and charged or ticketed for the offenses under the regulations. I must say here that those persons who have been ticketed for the offenses under the COVID regulations are reminded that there is a grace period of 31 days in which you have to make payment on that ticket to any of the magistrate courts. Well, of course, in the jurisdiction where your ticket was issued. Failure to do so will result in a charge being brought against you, where you will be required to, again, answer to that charge at the magistrate court. In addition to those offenses that would have been committed under the COVID regulations, we also saw a number of general offenses during the period, to include 3 murders, the seizure of over 890 pounds of cannabis, carrying a street value of over 2 million EC dollars. We also saw some domestic violence incidents and sexual offenses, for which a number of persons were arrested and charged. I must hasten to say here that the Special Victims Unit is fully functional, and they can be reached at the hotline number 400. So if you are experiencing, you become or you are a victim of any domestic violence, sexual offense, or any other offense, you can reach the Special Victims Unit at the number 400. We are also seeing a trend in the use of social media threatening harm against police. The first being a video perpetrating harm against key individuals and the police. After investigation, we found out that that video was not made in Grenada. We have information that that video would have originated from Trinidad and Tobago. So at this point in time, no arrest has been made in pertaining to that first video. The second social media information was that of a thread of messages on Facebook or WhatsApp threatening harm against police, which was done after our investigation recognized that this was done by Grenadians, and which resulted in the identification of 2 individuals, one of whom was already arrested and charged for the offense of threatening language. The third was a musical video, which was very disturbing and offensive, promoting the use of offensive weapons and displaying same in a public place. This is unacceptable and will not go unpunished by the law. Investigation is still being carried out in this matter. I want to speak a bit about what we see also developing as another trend, and that is a total misunderstanding of the easement that are pronounced by the government on a weekly basis. We've seen from the start of this limited state of emergency, every week the government will indicate to the state what are some of the things that are allowed to happen and are not allowed to happen. And this has been the trend, where we started off with a complete lockdown, and as the week rolled, we saw the easement of a number of activities that were not allowed to happen before, that were given the okay to happen and to operate in the new dispensation. A lot of people are misunderstanding this easement to mean that they are free to just get up and do anything or engage in any activity. That is not the case. We are still under a state of emergency, and a curfew is still in effect. As a matter of fact, when you examine the regulations, you would see that it specifies that a curfew is in effect from the period of 7 a.m. on the morning of that day of the pronouncement for 7 days to 7 a.m. at the expiration of that 7 days. So a curfew is in effect. But what happens during the curfew is that a period of movements is given for persons to access important services, essential services, supplies, and so on. And unless and until the activity is pronounced as having the authority or the permission to operate during that period of time, you should not be engaged in that activity. If you do, you will be in violation of the regulations. So the misunderstanding of thinking that when a pronouncement is made that there's an easement in a particular sector, that it means that everybody should just do something, whether or not it has been part of the regulations or those that has been given authorized to move or to do, it is an offense. So pay particular attention. I'm appealing to the public to pay particular attention to the pronouncements. If a particular sector is not pronounced as being authorized to operate, then you should not operate, because you will be dealt with according to the regulations. As I speak on easement, I also want to take the opportunity to mention here that as we go forward, you will see other easements. In other words, other sectors will be opened up to operate. And one of which I know is a burning issue is that of public transportation. Now, I am not at liberty to speak in detail of this matter, since we are still engaged in consultation with the Ministry of Transportation and other key stakeholders. But I want to say here that the modalities for the operations of public transportation is one that would change the dynamics in a very unique way, because, again, the physical distancing protocol and the sanitization and all of these things must be taken into consideration when we open up for the use of public transportation. So again, we want to appeal to the public to bear patience. We are doing well so far. Let us not lose focus on what we are doing and why we are doing what we are doing. And to appeal to everybody to do their part to keep Grenada safe. Now, finally, before I hand over back to the moderator, I want to mention to the general public and to inform the general public that the RGPF is currently in its preparation stage for the 2020 hurricane season. And that comes amidst the whole operations of COVID-19. It's a difficult challenge for us, since the focus as we speak is on COVID, but we understand the need to be prepared for the hurricane season. And we have been doing this over the years, and we have been blessed without having a hurricane since Emily. But we cannot let down our guard and become complacent. So while the RGPF prepares, we are asking the general public to do their part as well and prepare. And so I would stop here and wait for your questions later. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Assistant Commissioner Jesmond Prince. A lot of information there from you. I will go over now to Superintendent Vanny Cohen.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson, and good morning to your members of the media. Good morning to the general public. You're listening or viewing us from wherever you are. God bless you on a beautiful morning in Grenada, if you're not in Grenada. We have had several calls in the last week as to what has happened, that we have not had a press conference last week. I must admit that the country is settling down very nicely, and because of that, we think all of the information were provided to you, and there was not a need to do that. However, subsequent to the Prime Minister's announcement on Sunday, we have seen a lot of misunderstanding, as ACP Prince has indicated, and as a result of that, we find ourselves having to address you this morning on some of these issues, and also quite a lot of the traffic related issues that has happened in the last week or two, and that are going to be happening going forward. I'm going to be addressing some of the issues that Mr. Prince have started on. I'm going to build on some of them as it relates to the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations and some of the violations that we have been seeing. So I want to start with the Prime Minister's address on Sunday, because coming out of this address, we have seen some issues that we believe that the public did not quite understand or did not quite get. And because of that, we believe that confusions were left or created in the minds of some people as to what they could and cannot do based on what we have seen on the ground. So on Sunday of this week, the Honorable Prime Minister addressed the nation, and he announced greater easement of the restrictions that we have become accustomed to over the last few weeks. In his address, he extended the business days to every day of this week and announced additional businesses that are now authorized to open going forward. These businesses will remain open as we go forward. One of the significant easement is the partial opening up of our beaches from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m. And by the next day, beachgoers converge on many of the nation's beaches, and we have seen quite a lot of people enjoying that new easement and enjoying some sand and some sea. However, the easement of this restriction did not come with the relaxing of the established protocols that we have now become accustomed to. Neither was it an opportunity for our citizens to violate the emergency powers regulation by commencing beach parties and beach fetes. We have seen quite a lot of that this week. Mr. Prince was making the point that easement does not mean we're back to normal. Easement does not mean that what you used to do prior to the state of emergency are now allowed to happen. We are still under a state of emergency. We are still under curfew. And as the country come out of the phase that we are in, easement are being allowed. And it is being allowed for certain things to happen. What is not announced for happening should not happen. And so we have been responding to beach parties, beach fetes, birthday parties, extension of funeral arrangement by 20 and 30 people in some cases. And this is some of the issues that I want to address this morning. I want to say, though, that Section 9A and B of the Emergency Powers Act remain in force. And I'm going to take the time this morning to go through the provisions of this particular section so that I can make it clear in the minds of people what the section speaks to and what the restriction or violation are. The section says, no person shall host or attend any social activity of any description. Any social activity of any description, including a wedding. That's Section E, 9E. And 9B says, a funeral hosting more than 10 persons, in addition to the officiant and essential mortuary staff. So these are some of the issues we have seen this week. Beach parties, birthday parties, fete, funerals larger than 10 persons, and these are services calls we have responded to in this particular week. However, these restrictions does not speak primarily to the beaches. These provisions speak in a general sense, activities in a general sense, because it also covers the issue of drinking alcohol in public or on establishments. These provisions remain in place. These fetes that we have been seeing, people think is okay now that there is some easement that, you can stand by the side of the road and you can have a beer and you can have some alcohol in a glass. We are not there yet. The regulation still prohibits these type of activities, and we continue to enforce the regulation, and we continue to have calls for services and respond to these issues on a daily basis this week. I therefore want to remind the public that the curfew, as Mr. Prince was indicating, remains in force and is in force. The easement is given to us so that we can go about our daily lives to access the services that are common, that have common stream. And by now we're well familiar with what those services are, supermarkets, etc. And every week more services or more businesses are added to that list. So when that easement is being allowed, it's for us to go access those services and get back to our place of residence. It's not an opportunity for us to meet people we have not seen in a long time, congregate unnecessarily, violate the 6 feet, violate the alcohol provisions, go on the beach with your coolers and having a good time and having a birthday party for the whole neighborhood or for the whole world. We are not there yet. And I want to implore the public this morning. We continue to enforce this regulation. When the time comes that the country opens up in that sense, we would let you know. The government will let you know through some medium, maybe this medium, some other medium, but it will be communicated to the public. There will be no doubt when these activities can take place. They are not yet opened up, and you should not participate in activities that violate the COVID powers regulation. If you do, unfortunately, I have to say to you that law enforcement will respond, and we have been responding, and we will continue to respond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Vanny Cohen. We still have with us, of course, Superintendent Randy Connaught and Inspector Randall Batiste. So, Superintendent Connaught, I'll give you a moment to say a few words, and then we'll come to Inspector Batiste.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Moderator, and a pleasant good morning to you, the members of the media, and to the audience tuning to this press briefing. It is indeed a pleasure to be here once again to provide new information and feedback regarding our special vehicle inspection operations. I will present a general overview on the progress made in this respect, and Inspector Batiste would further drill down into more detail. First, I would like to acknowledge our partners in this effort, the Inland Revenue Department. They have been playing a very integral role in the success realized thus far. They supported this venture, and in addition to the management and staff of the Grenada National Stadium Authority, they have been very critical and a very essential partner in this effort. Now, 2 weeks ago, we commissioned what you call a three temporary inspection sites across the island. One at the National Stadium in the area of Gate 6, one at St. Francis Street in Guelph, and the other at the Pearls Airstrip. Now, the idea was to facilitate vehicle inspection on designated shopping days, because back then we only had 3 shopping days, and we wanted to seize the opportunity. And this was against the backdrop that there were a growing number of calls for vehicle inspection by members of the general public, seeing that we had that easement. And also, we were considering the fact that if we waited too long, then we would have a significant backlog of vehicles to be inspected. So this afforded us an opportunity to strategize and to utilize a strategy that would cater for large volumes of vehicles. So we had to look at the areas very carefully before making that determination, and to ensure that efficiency would be of paramount importance and a factor that was built in, and to ensure that we can manage the amount of vehicles that we were going to attend to on a day-to-day basis, considering the fact that there are curfew times, and the general public had to utilize the time afforded to them to attend to other business and also to try to squeeze in some time to have their vehicle inspected. But I must say that this operation surpassed our expectation, and the feedback has been encouraging thus far. The most noted feedback has been the appeal from a wide cross-section of the public to keep this new approach for the inspection. It is something that has been tabled already, and at the end, it will be one of our biggest takeaways, because when this arrangement comes to an end, and it will come to an end next Friday, this would be followed by a major postmortem, and recommendations would be tabled to the RGPF executive for consideration. And I guess as much, they will take it forward from there. Now, realizing the gains was not without its logistical challenges, which had to be ironed out first, some of which had significant cost implications. Most important to note was the commitment of persons who staffed the facility. We had a special arrangement up front with specific hours, but as we walked along, we had to adjust on the way, because we realized that the inspection hours had to be increased to facilitate the long queues and vehicles that were parked in our reserve parking areas. So days that were advertised as 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., we went as far as 6:15. There were days we went much longer than that. And we didn't start at 9 o'clock as we indicated. We hit the ground before 8, and at 8 o'clock promptly, we sought to start our operations. Now, the Inland Revenue Department, their staff is not under our control, and there are times they started before 8, but on every occasion, by 9 o'clock, revenue collection or payment for the license fees was done at 9 o'clock. Now, the inspection is into its 6th day today. We are at Pearls. And today, thus far, with the inclusion of Carrico, we have inspected, we have seen 2,533 vehicles passing the inspection. But we have inspected much more than that, because not all of the vehicles visiting the site actually pass the inspection. This is an interim measure, and though there were some challenges experienced by some members of the public, mostly because of the large number of vehicles coming into the inspection center, as I said, we had to adjust along the way. And we will be moving to add more days coming into next week. We should have been doing 3 days next week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday again. But we have since taken a decision to add more days. Inspector Batiste will drill down into this a little bit more. And taking into consideration that we have seen a number of senior citizens coming to the inspection site, a decision has been taken to set aside 1 lane, because we use 6 lanes at the inspection site. Set aside 1 lane and designate that for our senior citizens, and that I mean persons 65 years and above. Over the period of the curfew, we would have seen a decline in accidents. I should say a sharp decline in the number of road accidents. And it is primarily so because less vehicles on the road. But I would want to take you back to January into March. And from the tracking of our accidents statistics, we had an average of 209 accidents per month. The last being in March, we had 184 accidents. And in April, it moved all the way down to 87 accidents. Albeit to say that we had one fatality in April. So that brought us to, May, sorry, that's my bad. But to date, we have 2 fatal accidents, one in January and one in May. Both accidents are under investigation. One, I can say it has been closed. That was the one at Calivini. And we have one actively under investigation now. That's our most recent fatal accident, which happened on the 3rd of May at Corinth Public Road. So we have not been doing too bad in the area of accident, but being on lockdown days and having to experience 87 accidents, it is still cause for concern. Now, as we move into next week's operation, it would call for the attendance of more officers on the street because all of the days are open up for business. And it therefore takes into consideration that we'll have to withdraw our concession that was granted sometime before for persons to be allowed to park in the no parking areas. So with traffic density being increased, we have to draw back now. So next week, please God, full enforcement of the traffic regulations, especially as it relates to no parking. This would be enforced. We have also been doing some behind-the-scenes operations, which most of the general public doesn't know about. I just thought it wise that I mention it here. Inspections have not only been limited to the special inspection sites. We have been doing fleet inspection for businesses who have large fleets of vehicles, and it is something that has been in our portfolio for years now. And obviously, we would want to continue that arrangement with the general public. So inspection was not limited to the special inspection sites. We had it at the different locations where companies had large fleets, and also at the St. George Port, where on a daily basis during the week we have to inspect new vehicles coming into the country. So our routine traffic management portfolio definitely has increased over the COVID period, and with the anticipated announcement, maybe in a not too distant future, with the possible opening up of the public transport system, with special arrangements being discussed, I could tell you it is going to be a very Herculean task for traffic officers going forward. But what I am assured of is a level of commitment and dedication by the staff. And I am pleased to be associated with such an incredible bunch of people. Now, I want to say, just before breaking off, that the general public and all the other partners who have been supporting and giving words of encouragement and feedback to the Royal Grenada Police Force, we do value those comments and the support that which you have been given. And for our officers, I must acknowledge them for the diligent service and distinguished service in these very crucial times. I will call it a wrap here, and back to you, Liz.
Thank you, Superintendent Randy Connaught. A lot of information there from you. Thank you so very much. We go now to Inspector Randall Batiste, attached to Administration and the Traffic Department.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. A pleasant good morning to the members of the media and the viewers of this press conference. It's a pleasure for me being here among my colleagues to share information, much needed information to the general public. I will start off with reference to giving some statistics to break down. Mr. Superintendent Connaught would have mentioned that we had 2,533 vehicles that would have passed the inspection. I want to zero in by giving some stats as to the amount of vehicles that would have passed inspection per location. And at the stadium, 1,572 vehicles would have passed inspection. Over a period of 3 days, we would have conducted inspection at the stadium for 3 days thus far. At Grove, 366 vehicles would have passed the inspection over a period of 2 days. At Paul's, 378 vehicles would have passed the inspection over a period of 1 day. And at Carriacou, between the 4th of May to the 14th of May, 217 vehicles would have passed inspection, giving us a total of 2,533 vehicles passing inspection. I want to give some clarity as it relates to persons that would have been qualified to be exempted from the late fee in relation to the vehicle inspection. And I will speak towards two periods here, the second and third period. The second period, vehicles that were due to be licensed by the 31st of March, those persons are exempted from paying the late fee once the vehicle was licensed, inspected and licensed no later than the 22nd of May 2020. So you must inspect and license your vehicle no later than the 22nd of May 2020 in order for you to be exempted from the late fee for that period. And I'm speaking to the second period vehicles that were due for the 31st, by the 31st of March. And just to give some more, the vehicles that falls within that category of the 31st of March would have been vehicles with plural lettering from 251 to 500, and vehicles with single lettering from 2,501 to 5,000. In addition to that, vehicles that falls in the category for the third period will also be exempted from paying the late fee once the vehicle was inspected and licensed no later than the 29th of May 2020. And I'm speaking about vehicles with plural lettering from 501 to 750, and vehicles with single lettering from 5,001 to 7,500. What is important to note here is that if your vehicle were inspected before those dates for the category you fall in, but you did not pay the relevant fee before the date, you will be required to pay the late fee. Because times persons is of the understanding once they would have inspect before the expiry date, they can pay at any time. But that's not the case. You must pay before the due date in order to be exempted from the late fee. So I just wanted to explain that. Superintendent Connaught would have spoke about coming to the end of the special arrangement, and the special arrangement will end on the 22nd of May 2020. So come next week, that will be the final week for the special arrangement as it relates to the vehicle inspection. And as mentioned by Superintendent Connaught, we are doing it for the entire week, Monday to Friday next week. That's the week from the 18th to the 22nd. And as a result, I will just outline the schedule for that particular week as it relates to the inspection and the days, the location. So Monday 18th, Tuesday 19th, and Wednesday 20th, inspection will be conducted at the National Stadium in the area of Gate 6. On Thursday 21st, inspection will be done at Guave on St. Francis Street. So there is a change to how it was done for the past 2 weeks. We was doing Guave on the Wednesdays, but now it has been moved from Wednesday to the Thursday. And on Friday, we'll end at Paul's Airstrip. Also, we have the fourth period, which is the last period for the vehicle registration. That's vehicles with plural lettering 751 to 999, and vehicles with single lettering 7,501 to 9,999. These vehicles inspection period should have commenced on the 16th of May. However, it will commence now on the 19th of May, Tuesday, the 19th of May, and it will expire on the 30th of June 2020. So persons that fall within that batch can start to get a vehicle inspected from Tuesday, 19th of May. So come Monday, 25th of May 2020, we will be going back to a form of normalcy in relation to motor vehicle inspection. So I just want to outline, in case persons might get carried away by being so caught up with the special arrangement that we would have made before, to remind them as to the days for the normalcy. So we have 7 inspection centers throughout the Tri-Island State of Grenada, Carriacou, and Petit-Martinique. We have the police garage at Dusty Highway, which will conduct inspection Monday to Friday every Monday to Friday of each week. That's for St. George's. And then we have at Paul's Airstrip every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of each week. Then at St. David's Police Station every Thursday and Friday of each week. Soters Police Station, that will be at the fire police station in Soters every Thursday and Friday of each week. Also at Victoria Police Station every Wednesday of each week. At Guelph Police Station every Monday and Tuesday of each week. And at Carriacou every Monday to Friday of each week. And the inspection will start from 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. And that's it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inspector Randall Batiste. Okay, colleagues, we got a lot of information from the officers here. We are ready to open the floor for your questions. Anybody's ready as yet? All right, good morning, Mikey. Go right ahead.
Hi, good morning. All right, so from the beginning of the curfew to now, have you seen an increase in criminal activity and accidents now that people have probably gotten accustomed to things?
Okay. I cannot say that there is an increase of criminal activities. Things seem to be normal as it relates to criminal activities for the period since we started this. It is difficult to say that there has been an increase because this period of curfew has never existed before. This period has never existed before, so we cannot really compare it to any other period. What we have seen is just offenses spread out throughout the period, varying from the murders that we've seen, some sexual offense, domestic violence, and so on. They are spread out over the period. What we've seen is an increase in the offenses against the COVID Act. When we started this, a lot of people were not certain, so they kind of complied from the beginning. And then later on, we start seeing when the easements have been announced, we've seen people just doing things kind of crazy to the point where they did not care anymore. And so we had to take action. So we've seen a number of, an increase in that, in the offenses against the COVID-19 regulations.
Do you have another one, Mikey?
Okay, so that answers my question. $2 million in drugs, that's a lot. Would you say that it in some way had to do with vulnerabilities from the regulations itself?
Well, the fact that the COVID regulation was a special regulation for the COVID period, what we think happened during that period is that some persons saw the opportunity to engage in the trade despite the fact that they were not supposed to move, to remain in their place of residence. They decided that they want to take a chance to do something and probably get away with it. Unfortunately, that was not the case. So we see the result that they've been caught, and of course, the seizures were made. Now, that is the funny thing about the people that are involved in that trade. They would look for any opportunity to be engaged in this. And if we do not have good intelligence, they would sometimes get away with it. Unfortunately, that was not the case this time around.
Any other question from you, Mikey?
Okay. Yes, I have just one more question in this round.
All right.
I monitored a report that came from the police a couple days ago. It spoke to a female at Woburn who was charged with money laundering, having in her possession in excess of $14,000. I wasn't really, I didn't really pick up what really the offense was, because I did not know that it was illegal, and you could probably enlighten me on this, to have a certain amount of money within your property, and that constituting money laundering, unless there is a separate offense that's associated with that charge that we are not aware about.
Thank you for the question, Mikey. In this particular case, and in money laundering generally, the mere possession of a sum of money does not constitute the offense of money laundering. You must have that sum of money, and that sum of money must be tainted in some way. In other words, it must be the conduct or the result of some criminal conduct. All right? And I want to put it this. There is a British case, and I'm glad you asked the question, Mikey, because it gives me an opportunity to explain to the nation how the law on money laundering works. There is an interesting case coming out of the Court of Appeal in England that addresses the issue of money laundering. It's a case of Aaron Anvar. And it speaks to two elements that law enforcement will look to in determining what constitutes money laundering, or how one can be convicted for the crime of money laundering. And it speaks about the monies being derived from a kind or kinds of crime. So not specific crime, crimes in general. If the money can be tied to any sort of crime, it can be, or it is, money laundering. And the second point that court made is that they enunciated in that particular court the irresistible inference that the jury would have. In other words, summing up all of your excuses, summing up all of what has happened, there is no other conclusion that the jury could come to but to say that this money was in some way associated with some criminal conduct. So I want to make the point here clear. It is not just the possession or possessing of the sum that constitutes money laundering, but the possessing of the sum that is tied to some criminal conduct or the results of some criminal conduct is what makes it money laundering. And in investigation, a lot will be done. You would ask to explain your possession of that sum. It is going to be traced and tracked. If you said you get it from some economic activity, we're going to track all of the activities that you speak of. If at the end of the day it doesn't add up, then the inference can be drawn that the only logical conclusion is that this money comes from some sort of criminal activities. And in that case, you will be charged for money laundering.
Thank you very much. All right, Sherry, just 1 second. Linda Straker, good morning.
Good morning, all. My question, I have quite a few questions. I don't know how much I'll be able to ask you in this round. My first question is to Mr. Jesmond Prince. In his introductory remarks, he said that there were 890 pounds of cannabis that was confiscated, valued at more than 2 million. Is that 2 million street value or wholesale value?
It's street value.
And I want to know whether or not drones were part of the process of assisting police in these drug busts. Linked to that, I also would like to know if was only cannabis that was seized during that period, if we had other drugs that were seized,
yes,
and whether or not, based on the police report coming into us, I was able to check at least 5 in Ascension who was associated with some of those crimes that was sent to us already. How much other nationals, foreign nationals, was associated with the seizure for that period, and any other drugs? That's it for now. I'll ask others.
That's a lot of questions there, Ms. Straker. All right, let me see if I can answer them. First and foremost, the value of $2.2 million, was street value. Yes, that was a street value estimate. The drugs that were seized during the period of time were mainly marijuana or cannabis. We've had some seizure of cocaine to the sum of about 12 ounces. That too had a street value of about 1,000 EC dollars. And we also had some seizure of cash, I think somewhere in the vicinity of $38,000. In terms of the nationalities that were involved in the arrest for the cannabis and the other drugs involved, as you correctly stated, they were Vincentians and Grenadians. There were no other nationalities involved in the seizure or arrest for those offenses. I can't remember the last question, but I don't know if there was another one that I missed.
Linda, can you repeat?
No, the question on the drone. I just remember. The question on the drone, no, the drone was not involved in any of that operation.
All right. Sherry-Ann, good morning.
Good morning. Hello, are you hearing me now?
Yes, we are hearing you. Go ahead.
I have two questions for clarity. One has to do with an observance of athletic training at the Tantine, the Roy St. John playing field. I would like to know if that aspect has returned. And part two, yesterday, vehicles were recorded traversing that piece of broken road in Molineux where you have both no entry signs at both ends. So I would just like to have a feedback on those two at this moment. Thanks.
Let me address the issue of the athletics training. While there is an easement for physical exercising to take place, remember there should be no social gathering and the physical distancing must be adhered to. I do not know all of the elements that is involved with what you are speaking of. If it is an organized group of people, that could be a violation of the regulation. However, if one or two persons decide they're going to use the track for their form of exercising, maintaining the social distancing protocol, now that will be okay. But if a coach decides he's going to call his athletes, and there are going to be 15, 20 of these athletes in an organized session, that will be a violation of the regulation. However, if I choose, or if someone chooses to use the recreational ground to do their exercise within the prescribed time that is allowed, that should be okay.
Okay, let me just get it. Go ahead.
I would take a second question, Sherry. This is news to me with respect to vehicles traversing within a closed section of road at Molineux, and it's definitely something that we would look into. But I want to remind the general public that the road closure is still in effect, and we would be fully enforcing that road closure in the area. I would want to also make an appeal to the motoring public especially, and to persons who traveling on vehicles, to ensure that you do not put your life and safety and the safety of others at risk by breaking the law. And if you're found breaking the law, definitely the necessary action in accordance to the law would be applied in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy Maguire, just 1 second. Let me just get in two questions here from online. Somebody is asking why the police using the age of 65 for the people in the special lane and not 60. And somebody else is saying that they're a businessman in St. George's. They want to know if all stores have the green light to open.
If I am correct, 65 is generally the age used by most businesses in considering who a senior citizen is. We understand the fact that most people retire at age 60, but in considering senior citizen, most of the establishment would use the age 65 and up. So we're just following what we consider to be an established pattern in determining who a senior citizen is. It is not etched in stone, and if it needs to be revisited, and this is easy to do, but we're just following what has been already established.
The other question was somebody wanted to know if stores have the green light to open.
No, we are not yet. The regulations or the committee have not yet given the all clear for all stores to open. Week after week, we announce what is going to be opening, and the regulation covers stores and businesses that are allowed to open. The regular retail stores in town, they are not yet cleared to open, and we admonish that they continue to adhere to the regulations and wait until their particular business is on the list for opening. Until then, patience is required and asked for, and understanding and caution must be the watchword.
Thank you. Nancy Maguire, good morning. Go ahead, Nancy.
I have two questions. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes, we are. Go ahead.
Thank Thank you. First, a while back, when we were talking about violations for the regulations, there was a suggestion that the police weren't being too aggressive regarding masks. But now that more businesses are opening and health and safety seems to be the priority for opening doors for employees, for visitors to businesses, will the police become more aggressive in ticketing people for not wearing masks or face coverings? And my second question relates to police officers being tested. The last report was that there was testing going on. There were some in quarantine. I'd like to know how many are being tested, if it's going on, and if any more are being quarantined. Thank you.
Ms. McGuire, to address your question on the aggressiveness of the police with regarding masks, I don't want to use the term being aggressive. I want to use the term the police enforcing the regulation. It may seem aggressive to the public, but we're doing what we're asked to do and what we're being paid to do, which is to enforce the regulation. And the regulation then, the period that you spoke of, made it mandatory that masks should be worn publicly, understanding that that was one of the channels or one of the conduits of the transmission of the disease. And to ensure that the disease doesn't spread beyond where it was at the time, yes, we had to do what we have to do to ensure that we contain and mitigate against the spread of it. The other slant that you have taken, the fact that more businesses have opened up, but what we have also seen is that there are change in the thinking of the committee in terms of the mask. So the regulation that speaks to the compulsory wearing of the mask in public then is not the same provisions that we are now following. So once you stay within the remits of what the law requires you to do in terms of wearing the mask, you will be safe. It speaks to wearing masks in the line, wearing masks in business places, and what have you, and we are going to continue to enforce those regulations, understanding that this is one of the critical things that we need to do to mitigate against the spread of this virus. It is your life, it is my life, and it is the life of every citizen of Grenada, Carrick, and Petit Martinique. And what we are doing is supporting the efforts of the Ministry of Health in ensuring that this virus does not go beyond where it has already gone. You did ask a question, sorry, about the testing of police officers and quarantine. Yes, we did indicate in our last press brief that a number was given then as to the amount of police officers tested, and I did indicate then that there were a number of police officers who were on quarantine. Happy am I to report this morning that all of those police officers who were on quarantine are now back to work. None of our officers are infected with the virus, and all who were on quarantine are now back to work. Testing continuing not as aggressively as it has been then, because as you would appreciate that we have not had any announcement from the Ministry of Health in the last week or two. It means that there is some sort of containment that is happening, but we continue to ask that our officers who have been exposed in some way or the other, 2 persons who were exposed to the virus, be tested. And yes, testing is continuing, not at the rate and scale that it has been before. But we are happy to report that all of our officers are safe, have not been tested positive for the virus, and those who were in quarantine are now back to work.
Okay, colleagues, Linda, you have another question?
Yes, I do. Officer Cohen mentioned about the misinterpretation of what has been announced so far. Every week we are getting more and more easement. Now, in the earlier days of lockdown, when the police had briefing, we were provided with data as to the number of persons who was arrested and possibly what they were arrested for. Looking at my notes, I go back to the last time when he would have said that 10 persons, I think 10 or 11 persons were arrested for having a party, I think, in Woburn. Now, this morning he's mentioning of persons having parties on the beach, birthday parties, and more persons going to funerals. Now, since can you update us as to the amount of persons who have been arrested in violation of the Emergency Powers Act, and possibly which offense they were arrested attached to? Because you mentioned birthday parties, beach parties, and so forth. So can you give an idea as to the amount of persons who has now been officially charged under the Emergency Power Act, and possibly those who have been ticketed?
Unfortunately, Ms. Shrika, I do not have the data, collected the data, and mined the data so as to give you specifics. I promise you at a later stage, we will be able to tabulate all of what has happened and be able to present to the nation what we have seen. These are unprecedented times. We have never had a state of emergency like that before. And so I think it's important that the nation know what has happened. Unfortunately, this morning, I do not have the cumulative data with me, but I promise at some stage, I will be able to present that to you and to the nation.
I do have a follow-up, Les. Linked to Section 9 of the legislation is the use of the word social activity. No one shall host or attend a social activity. Can you tell us what is the definition for a social activity in law?
I think, Ms. Rika, you're sending me back to either English class or a legal study here. We are to interpret the legislation. The legislation did not give us a definition of what social activity is, so obviously we go to the ordinary English dictionary to find what that definition is, and then we apply it.
My final question for now is, also in the earlier days, we were told of no reports of child abuse and child neglect, and in some cases domestic violence. As we go older, into this 5 weeks, 6 weeks going, we are now learning of such reports. Is there a compilation as to the type of abuse that has been happening? Earlier in the year and late into last year, there has always been, every week we've seen of 2, 3 child sexual abuse cases. Can you share with us what is happening in that under those data with regard to child sexual abuse and other form of abuse cases?
I cannot speak definitively about child sexual abuse. What I can say to you is that we have had a few reports of domestic abuse as it relates to children. I cannot speak, I do not know, and I'm subject to correction here, that we have ever presented child sexual abuse. I know we have presented some form of domestic abuse. We have had 2 persons arrested in the past week with that. We continue to see 1 or 2 of that happening, and we continue to see 1 or 2 of domestic disputes on a whole, not necessarily domestic violence, but domestic disputes. Those we have seen, and this is understandable. People who have not been in the house for so long together collectively. I mean, that was one period. Now we had a period where you're forced to be home, mother, father, and in some cases, the entire family. And so there are going to be disputes, there are going to be disagreements, there are going to be issues brought between brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, and we have seen those. Most of them are not violent, but there are disputes that we have attended to, we have responded to, and in some cases, no arrests were made because it was not necessary to make these arrests, because police officers are not only police officers for arrests. We sit with disputing parties, we counsel, we bring solutions to problem, you know, and we have done a lot of that. In these difficult times, the focus was not on arrest and court. The focus was on helping people understand the time they were going through, how we can relieve, you know, the stress that many people were under, and we played our part in the, you know, in the social aspect of our job as well. And we've done that, well, in my view, very well.
Okay, great. Colleagues, so we've passed the 1 hour mark, so we'll have to wrap up in a minute. Mikey, go ahead quickly.
All right. In the presentation this morning, we heard of emergency situations, and you have to wait for the people manning these roadblocks to approve of your emergency before you can proceed. After proceeding in your first block, let's say somebody is living in Soteres, I guess they will be meeting several roadblocks. Will they have to explain the same situation to every roadblock that they meet, or will the information be communicated so as to eliminate the amount of delays you have in that emergency?
Okay, yes. Mikey, one of the ways in which we appeal to the people or the persons who are having these emergencies is first and foremost to call the 911 number. Once that person calls the 911 number, they would relate their information, where they're coming from, what is the emergency, where they're coming from, what vehicle they're driving, and that sort of information will be communicated to the 911 operator. That information then will be communicated to the checkpoints that are on that route to the hospital. The checkpoints that are on that route will be informed of that vehicle are being on its way to the hospital. However, it is still necessary for that checkpoint to verify that that information that was communicated then was not a hoax. Because as you know, people have all kind of ways of making certain claims or certain things, and then when you really knock on it, you realize it's not what it is. So the checkpoint person has to make sure and verify, and this should not be very long or lengthy. And once that is verified, then they can communicate to the next checkpoint that that person is coming through. I've already checked them, they're okay, let them through. So that is the kind of communication that is expected to happen throughout or in the case of an emergency. And we are saying this and we are making this publicly known so that persons with these kinds of emergencies will communicate, will call and ensure that the information is communicated so that they would not be hindered during their movements.
If I can just have a quick question just for clarity. The public transportation system will be opening up pretty soon. Is that happening, the conversation being had with the representatives from the various associations so that you don't end up in any misunderstanding or contentious situation when the buses are now allowed to operate?
I think that this is another phase of the discussion. There were some preliminary discussions with some of the major stakeholders, the Ministry of Transportation, and some of the other areas that needed to be early in the discussion. Subsequent to the discussion, we believe that we need to have a plan if we are going to speak with the Bus Association. And so the Bus Association, as we speak, will now become part of the discussion going forward.
Okay, great. So we'll take the final two questions, Nancy McGuire, and one that I have online. Somebody's seeking clarification as to whether they are just signs on both ends of the Molyneux Road or they're roadblocks. And if they're just signs, why aren't there roadblocks instead, just to ensure that people do not go through that area? And then Nancy McGuire will come to you and wrap things up.
Okay, just to answer the final question that's from the person online. There are signs at the both ends of the Molyneux section of road that is closed. But taking into consideration that the road is affected to some distance inside of the roadblock, and there are residents in that area who can still have access, who should still have access to that piece of road. We allow for only persons who reside at least 100 meters past the roadblock at the intersection with Mount Morris Junction to have access to the residents higher above, and they are not affected or they would not be placing themselves at undue risk if they have to traverse to the place of residence. So roadblock is permanent on the end of the Happy Hill side, but it is slightly affording some vehicular access on the Mount Morris end, just for the residents higher up.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Final question.
Thank you. I'm just asking about people that are back to work, back in an office somewhere, and they're feeling that they're not getting the proper social distancing. First of all, should they call the police? And secondly, are the police involved in looking, just peeping in the front door of businesses to see if the social distancing is taking place? Because there's so many businesses now that are open. Thank you.
I'll take the second part of your question first. And to answer you, yes, when as businesses come in stream and as we do our patrols, we do at times peep into businesses to ensure that the line is what it should be in terms of the physical distancing. But if you're in an establishment that doesn't cater for the 6 feet, then the managers or the owners of the establishment have a responsibility in law under the regulation to ensure that if you're called out to work, the spacing, the physical distancing can be applied. If you're uncomfortable, my suggestion will be you need to have a discussion with the manager, the owners, to say, hey, listen, I am not comfortable sitting that close to my colleague because it requires me being 6 feet and the office may not allow for 6 feet. So there may have to be some retrofitting, some adjustment because your health is at stake here and you should take responsibility for your health.
Thank you very much. So, gentlemen, you all have a minute each to just say any parting words that you may have. We can start with you. Sure.
Okay. Well, again, we want to thank you for the opportunity to share with the public some of our concerns and our plans in going forward, and to basically remind the public that we are not yet out of the clear with this situation, and the fact that we are in it and we are still going into the hurricane season, being in a COVID environment. We want to exercise extreme care and caution with what we do and plan for the hurricane season in the best way. As we know, every family should have their family plan, and businesses should have their own plan so that you could mitigate against any severe damages that could occur. So again, we are not yet out of the clear, and we are going through. We've been doing well thus far. Let us continue on that part, and let us be each other's keeper to keep Grenada safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Cohen.
In closing, I just want to make an appeal to the public and provide some information. We have heard in quite a lot of our press briefings before the notion of police brutality. We've heard it a lot. I've been, had to address this question on almost every press briefing that we have had. I want to say to the public that the Community Relations Department of the RGPF, we have now normalized our operations. Staff is back in place. And so anybody who feel that they were aggrieved in one way or they feel aggrieved one way or the other by the actions of the police, you're invited to come into the community, well, not come in, call in, and when it's possible on the business days, you can come into the Community Relations Department and you can lodge whatever complaints that you have. We have seen a lot of videos. We have not had much of these complaints coming in. I want to give the public the assurance that complaints against police officers do not get swept under the rug. We do investigate these complaints. We send the file to the Director of Public Prosecution, who advises on what action, if any, that should be taken. So we are not making those decisions at our level. So there is that level of confidence that I want to give the public, that if you feel aggrieved under this period or any other period, you have the right to call in or come into the Community Relations Department and lay your complaint. We investigate it. We'll keep you posted. We send the file to the DPP. The DPP advises and directs what needs to happen. And the public know by now that we have arrested and charged quite a lot of our own over the last couple of years. And that's an indication that we do not intend to sweep anything under the rug, and justice for one is justice for all, including our police officers. I want to say thank you to members of the media and to the public for adhering to the regulation, and those of you who played your part in ensuring that Grenada remains safe and that we do not have more than we have had. I want to thank you for your cooperation. Those of you who cooperated with whether it's law enforcement, the Ministry of Health, it required a holistic effort, a country effort to be where we are now. And as Mr. Prince said before, the vast majority of Grenadians played their part and delivered that kind of cooperation that we needed to ensure to be where we are. So as we go forward and as we open up more, please let's be guarded and be vigilant, and that we do not just, violate everything all in one and get us back to where we have just come from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Go right ahead.
All right, thank you, Les. I must say that I am encouraged by the level of support that we have been receiving from the general public. And I think that gives us the impetus to make the additional sacrifice that is required in these very unusual times. But I will just end here by saying that we have opened up a full week of inspection next week, and I would urge persons with vehicles to take advantage of it. And even though the lines can become long at times, because just getting an update from Pearls, I understand that Pearls is over already, has a very high volume of traffic up there, but we would manage, suffice to say. But after having your vehicles inspected, and you collect your inspection certificate, you can use the one-stop facility that would be in place until next Friday. Or if you so choose to do, you can go away with the certificate and make your payment at any of the district revenue offices, and then you collect your license decal thereafter. So I would encourage again to all of us, the motoring public especially, to be extremely careful and to drive with due care and a level of responsibility that would minimize our accidents along the roadway. I am encouraged, as I said, by the fact that the general public is very supportive of our efforts, and we do take on board and we critically examine all of the feedback that we're given, and they would form part of the recommendations going forward. I look forward again with great anticipation to appear on a similar program, so at least we can provide further update. Thank you and have a blessed day, everyone.
Thank you so much. Last but by no means least, Inspector Randall Batiste.
Thank you very much, and I want to say thanks to the GIS for giving me the opportunity to shed much and important information to the general public. I want to remind persons that is preparing to do the inspection, it's very important to do your re-inspection, ensure that everything that is needed to be done and your vehicle is in that state of roadworthiness. For persons who have access to the laws of Grenada, I would advise you to read Regulation 22 of Chapter 201 of Volume 9 of the 2010 revised edition of the laws of Grenada, and this will definitely give you a clear indication as what is your requirements prior to going to do your vehicle inspection. So once again, I want to say thank you.
Thank you very much, and here's where we end things for today. Thank you, gentlemen. Assistant Commissioner Jesmond Prince, Superintendent Vanny Kerwin, Superintendent Randy Connaught, and Inspector Randall Batiste. Always a pleasure to have you to update the nation. Colleagues, thank you so much as well for all your questions. And just to leave with you a bit of information, there will be a COVID-19 update statement by the Ministry of Health at 12:30 this afternoon. And also let us remember our National Day of Prayer on Sunday. Have a great day, everybody, and a blessed weekend. Thank you.